It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Raúl Herrera. Hi, Raúl. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon. How are you, Douglas?
Doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Your book is called Capturing Skunk Alpha, a Barrio sailor's journey into Vietnam. Is this your first published book, or have you published other work?
First book.
First book.
First
Okay.
book. I have published as a freelance writer. I have published in Sea Classics magazine, the Vietnam magazine, and also an article in Time magazine. New York Times. Forgive me.
New York Times.
New
okay.
York Times. Yes.
Okay. You know, what was interesting to me reading through this was that there isn't a lot of stuff about the Vietnam War from the ocean perspective. You know, so much of it is all the jungles and Agent Orange, and you don't even hear about the Navy that much. The only thing that I remember seeing was at the end of the war when they were pushing all the helicopters off the decks of the aircraft carriers. And
yes, sir. That's I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so it's interesting that this is a story about the Navy's experience and involvement in Vietnam. So I'm happy to see something different from what I normally see. So this was your story, right? You were there. This is kind of a memoir.
It is exactly a memoir. Yes. It was brought on, basically. I have to be honest with you. I didn't favor English as a subject in high school. I had no idea of how to write a book. But this came to me as an epiphany. I had been haunted for years after returning from Vietnam. The fact that we lost our lead petty officer, a crusty old sailor, a boatswain mate in charge of the boat after the command of the Lieutenant J.G., who was our skipper. He was second in command. This was Bobby Don Carver. He was a boatswain's mate, first class. And we lost him on December the 6th, 1967, months after we had captured this particular enemy ship that's codenamed Skunk Alpha. And it was his spiritual influence through haunting events that I had over a number of years after my return. And finally one day I was sitting on Greek Island, the beach with my son, and I happened to see a sailboat, a raggedy sailed fishing vessel from the local village that crossed my view, and it reminded me, immediately flashbacks of the times that we inspected so many fishing junks while on patrol along the coast of Vietnam, and that's when I started thinking, well, listen, talking spiritually to my fallen mentor and nemesis. What is it that you're doing with me? Why are you creating all these haunting events in my life? It just was hair-raising. It was I couldn't deal with it, and it dawned on me. I had an epiphany that, well, maybe he wants me to tell our story, tell his story, and tell the story of swift boats. And we lost 50 sailors, swift boat sailors, during the course of time that swift boats served in Vietnam. But it was him, Bobby Don Carver. His spiritual influence is what drove me to picking up a pen and a pad and start putting this book together.
Ah, very interesting story. I'm looking at the book cover photo, and
yes, sir.
This looks like an old fishing boat of some kind. I mean, this is not a warship, right?
Well, it's a 120-foot steel hull resupply vessel from North Vietnam. Brand new. This is the result of our attack on it. What you see there, the picture was taken at the award ceremony in Da Nang, one of the largest city in northern sector of South Vietnam. And they dressed it up and they put banners on it and had They cleaned the deck of it. It was basically it was just a skeletal hull. All that was left of that vessel.
Oh, I see. This is the
amazing.
this is the after photo. This is the after photo of the conflict, right? The battle.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
sir. That is correct. What happened is that when we captured the ship, it was towed north from the grounds where we captured it in Quang Ngai Province, in the area of the Batangan Peninsula, a very stronghold for enemy forces, Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces. And that's where the cargo was destined. 90 tons of ammunition and supplies were destined for their troops on the ground there. And so then it ran aground. My boatswain, in fact, Carver, is the one who had a phosphorus round, an 81 millimeter mortar round, hand loaded into the tube of the mortar. And then he changed it to trigger fire mode, because normally when you see field forces, they drop the mortar in vertical position at a certain angle and then takes off, right? It explodes and fires off. Well, this mortar was special because we had trigger fire mode. And so it was hand loaded. White phosphorus 81 millimeter mortar round was hand loaded. He leveled the mortar. We were within 75 yards exchanging gunfire with this enemy ship. About 15 minutes after midnight, in darkness of the moon, pitch black. And he took aim, fired, and it went into the port side, the left side of the pilot house, and it burst into a white ball of flame. And so eventually it ran aground at the mouth of the Saki River. And when eventually the following day, the vessel was taken off the sandbar, and it was taken north to our base. Chulai is where I was stationed at. And they unloaded it, patched up the holes, and took it north again into the city of Da Nang, where they had dignitaries, and as a matter of fact, Premier Nguyen Cao Ki and Chief of State Nguyen Van Tu, they personally congratulated us and decorated us with the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry. So it was a big, big event. And you know, I reflect on what you said early. Yes, not much has been said about the Navy's involvement in Vietnam. And from time to time you may hear about the actions of the deep-water vessels up on the Gulf of Tonkin up there north that supported the aerial assaults from aircraft carriers and such. But very little has been, many books have been written about the Navy. I will tell you that, but none have reached the national level of awareness, and that's what my hope is, to be able to, before my passing, leave the Swiftboat legacy so that historians can evaluate it, consider it, and make ourselves part of the war effort, the positive side, because we certainly, as you may well have heard, there's always sayings that say, well, you know, we lost the war, we lost the wars. Well, if that's the case, the Navy won its share of battles, and this is proof positive. The Swiftboat community all along the 1,200-mile coast of South Vietnam, we captured a great number of, we intercepted a number of steel hull vessels during the course of our years in service there in Vietnam.
Is a swift boat similar to a PT boat?
Smaller.
It's
a small craft. Didn't have any torpedoes, like Kennedy's, President Kennedy's
right.
PT-109, I believe it was. No, they had torpedoes. We didn't. Although we did have a torpedoman. Our gunner's mate was, as a matter of fact, the man in charge of armament was a torpedoman by rate, but he took care of his position was in the gun tub above the pilot house, behind twin 50 caliber machine guns.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. So you had 50 caliber machine guns, and what else? The phosphorus.
Well, we had our swift boat was 50 foot long. These vessels were found in operation in Louisiana. They would take crews and supplies to oil rigs off the coast of Louisiana. They were built by Seaward Seacraft in Berwick, Louisiana. So the government, U.S. government, visited them, and they signed a contract and manufactured, modified those vessels. We're adding a cabin, a pilot house, on a gun tub on top of the pilot house, and the mortar and the fantail. They already had twin diesel V12 diesel engines that was used for our propulsion. So it was a fast boat.
Okay, well, it sounds like it. Boat. Yeah. So how fast was it? What was what was
25 knots, 25 knots or so. Typically, we'd run about maybe 18 knots. And don't give me the reply as to how many miles per hour that is, because at this time it just it was fast. We left a good wake. As a matter of fact, it was fast enough that my boat officer on our boat officer on the way back into port on his last patrol, he left a little early before we did. He left in February. We arrived in April of '67. He left in February of the following year. On his last patrol, he water skied behind a swift boat back into port.
Wow!
So it was fast. It was good. Yeah, we had a good ride.
So the Vietnam boat, the trawler.
The trawler.
What sort of weapons did they have on their boat?
They had 3 big guns, 2 midships on either side, and 1 on the fantail behind the structure, behind the pilot house structure. And they were anti-aircraft mounts. So when we had a 4-vessel intercept group that was waiting for this trawler to come in. We knew where it was coming. It had been tailed. Matter of fact, on July the 11th, it was spotted by a surveillance aircraft, a Navy surveillance aircraft. And when the aircraft went down, the vessel went dead in the water. What made it suspicious was that this trawler was coming perpendicular to the coast, and there was no harbor in sight. So that automatically made it suspicious. It was flying no flag of country origin either, and they had no radar. They had some fishing nets strewn about the top deck of the vessel, but that made it suspicious. And sure enough, they identified it as a resupply vessel coming south from North Vietnam. And when it was spotted, the vessel made 180 degrees and headed back out to sea, thinking, well, we've been had, so we better just, hightail it. So they went back out to sea. Well, in the meantime, the aircraft, air surveillance plane, they contacted Saigon with a report, and Saigon determined that it was an enemy ship. They ordered the USS Wilhoit, a destroyer, a radar picket ship, to go intercept that vessel as it was leaving the country, leaving the grounds of South Vietnam. And when it caught up with it, radar contact was established on this vessel after midnight on the 12th of July, 1967. And that's when the code name Skunk Alpha was given to this vessel. An unidentified vessel on open waters is called a skunk. And the first one after midnight is Alpha, followed by Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and so on.
Oh, I got you.
So this vessel, it went back out about 300 miles.
What do you think their purpose was?
Islands.
Oh, I'm sorry. What do you think their purpose was? Do you think they were
definitely
to take out the swift boats?
No, sir. No, their mission was to resupply the enemy forces on the ground.
Oh, okay. Supply
This vessel was carrying more than 90 tons of ammunition and supplies for the enemy.
Okay.
They had rockets, mortars, explosives, rifles. It was loaded in more than 90 tons.
So the boat...
go ahead.
The boat originated in North Vietnam?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. They had secret locations where these vessels were manufactured and loaded and came south to supply. Their initial mission was basically in the southernmost portion of South Vietnam. That was their location, their destination. That was the delta, if you will, the Mekong Delta. That was her primary location for unloading all these supplies, and then from there it traveled by land. And as a matter of fact, the North Vietnamese had been very, very successful. We didn't know that at that time. History now, the documents and so on have proven that they had been very successful in their infiltrating of arms via the sea for many, many years. It wasn't until, this was February the 16th of 1965, when Army helicopter pilot was flying south to an area field hospital with a patient, and he happened to fly over this peninsula that was oddly parallel to the coastline, and it established what's called Vung Ro Bay. And there they thought they saw a floating island. In fact, as they went closer down to investigate, because they were curious, they started getting automatic fire from behind. They had palm trees, they had bushes on top of the deck, camouflaging it. And so it turned out to be the first trawler that eventually led to the creation of Operation Market Time and the introduction of coastal surveillance units all along the coast.
The book is out. It has been released?
Yes, sir. June 27th was my release date.
Okay. How's the book doing? Are you getting positive reviews?
Doing well. Matter of fact, I'm so happy to say that this past weekend on Saturday, I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. This past weekend, I was invited to a book signing at the Twig bookstore in San Antonio, a very popular area in the Pearl Brewery complex, what used to be Pearl Brewing Company. And they sold out. They didn't tell me how many books, but they said they sold out.
Oh, well, that's great.
So
that's good news.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that. It's been very successful. I think I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I've been working on this literary project for more than 4 decades because of the mission. I made a promise to the boatswain that I would write our story, tell his story, so that his sons and his grandchildren would know that their relative didn't die in vain. You know, he died a hero.
Yeah.
He kept more than 90 tons of ammunition and supplies from the enemy. So yes, it's promise made, promise kept.
Well, that's great. Raul, we do have to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming on. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Yes, sir, absolutely. The website is actually https://skunkalpha.
Skunkalpha.com?
.com, yes, sir.
Okay.
And if I may add, for those curious, if you Google Capturing Skunk Alpha, of course you'll see a lot of bookseller sites that are offering it. But if you continue scrolling down, you'll see a book trailer that also is available. I think you'll find that interesting as well.
Oh, a video trailer for the book?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, great.
For the book, yes, sir. Very interesting.
Oh, that's super. Okay, well, we do have to wind this up. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Also, thank you for your service to our country.
Proud to have served.
And best of luck with the book. Hope it does well.
Thank you, Douglas. Thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me to your show.
Oh, you're welcome.
Enjoyed every minute of it.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.